Every day, 8-year-old Emma wore her father's old military jacket to school. Kids laughed and called it ugly. Teachers said it was wrong. Nobody understood why she wouldn't take it off. Then a visiting general saw the jacket and screamed in shock. Everything changed in that moment. Before watching full story, comment below from where are you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Emma Collins was a small 8-year-old girl with bright brown eyes and curly dark hair who lived in the quiet town of Millbrook with her mother, Sarah. Every single day, rain or shine, Emma wore her father's old military jacket to Jefferson Elementary School. The jacket was much too big for her tiny body, hanging down to her knees and with sleeves that covered her hands completely unless she rolled them up. It was faded olive green and looked worn from years of use. The fabric was soft from washing, and there were small repairs where tears had been carefully sewn up with matching thread. The other kids at Jefferson Elementary School always made fun of Emma because of this strange jacket choice. They didn't understand why she insisted on wearing something so old and oversized when other children wore bright, colorful coats that fit them properly. They thought it made her look poor or strange, like her family couldn't afford to buy her real children's clothes. "Look at Army Girl again," Tyler Johnson would say loudly every morning, laughing with his group of friends. Tyler was 9 years old, tall for his age, and considered himself the leader of the 4th grade. "What's with that gross old coat? It looks like it came from the garbage dump." Madison Pierce, an 8-year-old girl with blonde pigtails who always wore the latest fashion clothes, would wrinkle her nose whenever she saw Emma. "My mom says wearing military stuff when you're not in the army is totally disrespectful to real soldiers. Plus it's like way too big for you. Don't your parents have money to buy you a coat that actually fits? It smells funny too," added Jake Martinez, another student who always followed Tyler's lead. "Like it's been in a basement for 100 years. Why would anyone want to wear something so ugly?" Emma would try to explain quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was my dad's jacket. He was a soldier." But the kids never listened to her explanations. They were too busy laughing and pointing at how the sleeves hung down past her fingertips and how the shoulders drooped down her arms. The children thought she was making up stories about her father being in the military. They assumed her family was too poor to buy her new clothes, so they made up tales about the jacket having special meaning. Some kids whispered that her family probably got the jacket from a thrift store or charity donation center. Others thought Emma was trying to act tough or important by pretending to be connected to the military. "You're such a liar, Emma," Tyler would say during recess. "If your dad was really a soldier, where is he? Why don't we ever see him at school events like other dads?" Emma's eyes would fill with tears, but she couldn't find the words to explain that her father wasn't coming to school events because he couldn't. He had died when she was only 3 years old, and her memories of him were mostly from photographs and stories her mother told her. Even the teachers at Jefferson Elementary felt sorry for Emma, but they misunderstood the situation completely. Mrs. Henderson, Emma's classroom teacher, was a kind woman in her 40s with graying hair who genuinely cared about her students. But she also thought Emma's jacket was inappropriate for school. "Emma dear," Mrs. Henderson would say with concern in her voice, "maybe you should ask your mother to get you a proper winter coat. This military jacket isn't really appropriate for an 8-year-old girl to wear to school. The other children are starting to notice and I'm worried they might tease you." Mrs. Henderson had no idea that the teasing had been going on for months already. She thought she was helping by suggesting Emma change her clothing choice, not realizing that the jacket was the most precious thing Emma owned. Mr. Roberts, the school principal, was a serious man who liked rules and order. He called Emma's mother, Sarah Collins, one afternoon to discuss what he saw as a problem. "Mrs. Collins, we're concerned about Emma wearing that oversized military jacket to school every day. The other children are starting to tease her about it, and frankly, it's not appropriate school attire for a young girl. Perhaps you could find something more suitable for Emma to wear." Emma's mother, Sarah Collins, was a strong woman who worked 2 jobs to support her daughter. She had long brown hair like Emma's and tired eyes that held deep sadness. Sarah always defended her daughter's choice to wear the jacket. "That jacket belonged to her father," she would say firmly. "Emma has every right to wear it to school." But she never explained more than that to school officials. The pain of losing her husband was still too deep, even after 5 years. She couldn't bear to tell strangers about how Staff Sergeant James Collins had died serving his country. Sarah had met James when they were both 19 years old. He was home on leave from his first deployment, handsome in his dress uniform, with kind eyes and a smile that made her feel like the most important person in the world. They fell in love quickly and married before his second deployment. Emma was born during one of his brief times home, and James had been so proud to hold his tiny daughter. When James deployed for his final mission, Emma was only 2 years old. She barely understood that Daddy had to go away again, but she remembered him promising to come home soon. He never did. The knock on the door came on a rainy Tuesday morning, 2 military officers in dress uniforms standing on her porch with expressions of official sadness. Sarah had kept James's uniforms and military gear in a closet for years after his death, unable to look at them without crying. But when Emma turned 6 and started asking more questions about her father, Sarah decided to show her the uniforms. Emma had been fascinated by the patches and ribbons, running her small fingers over each one while Sarah explained what they meant. "Your daddy was very brave," Sarah had told her daughter. "He earned each of these patches by working hard and helping other people. This jacket protected him during his missions." When Emma asked if she could try on the jacket, Sarah's first instinct was to say no. But seeing the joy and pride in her daughter's eyes when she put on the oversized uniform top, Sarah realized this was Emma's way of feeling close to the father she barely remembered. Every day, Emma endured the mockery at school with quiet dignity that was remarkable for such a young child. Kids would pretend to march behind her during recess, making exaggerated soldier sounds. "Hot 2, 3, 4, they would chant mockingly. Some called her G.I. Jane, or Little Soldier Girl, in voices dripping with sarcasm. Others would whisper loud enough for her to hear that her family was weird, poor, or trying to get attention. The worst part of Emma's day was during lunch period. While other children sat in groups, laughing and sharing their food, Emma would sit alone at the end of a table, hugging the jacket around her small body for comfort. She would touch the patches on the sleeves gently with her fingertips, remembering her father's strong hands and the warm hugs he used to give her. She missed him so much it felt like a physical ache in her chest. Emma had studied every inch of her father's jacket with the dedication of a scholar. One patch showed a fierce eagle with spread wings clutching arrows and an olive branch. Her mother had explained this was the army patch that all soldiers wore. Another patch displayed a black skull with wings and a sword, which looked scary but represented her father's special training. There were colorful ribbons arranged in precise rows, and small metal pins that most people thought were just decorations. But to Emma, each one told a story her mother had shared about her father's bravery and service to his country. "Your daddy was a hero," Sarah would say during their bedtime talks, stroking Emma's hair while they looked through photo albums together. "He saved many lives with his courage and skill. This jacket represents all the good things he did for other people." Emma didn't fully understand what words like sacrifice and deployment meant, but she knew the jacket was special and sacred. It still smelled faintly of her father's cologne mixed with something she couldn't identify but that made her feel safe. The bullying got worse as the weeks passed. During lunch, kids would point and whisper loud enough for Emma to hear their cruel comments. "Why does she always wear that gross coat? Doesn't she have any other clothes at home? My dad says people who pretend to be soldiers when they're not are total fakes. She probably doesn't even have a dad. That's why she makes up stories." Emma's grades started dropping because she had trouble concentrating in class. She became quieter and sadder with each passing day. She stopped raising her hand to answer questions, even when she knew the answers. She stopped smiling at her teacher's jokes. During art time, she would draw pictures of soldiers instead of the flowers and rainbows that other children drew. But despite all the teasing and pressure from adults, Emma never stopped wearing the jacket. It was her strongest connection to the father she barely remembered but loved with her whole heart. Mrs. Henderson grew increasingly concerned about Emma's withdrawal from classroom activities. She pulled Emma aside after class one day, kneeling down to speak at eye level. "Emma, sweetheart, I can see that the other children's comments are bothering you. I know you love that jacket, but it's causing problems with your classmates. Maybe you could wear it at home and choose something else for school? I think it would help you make more friends." Emma shook her head firmly, showing more determination than most adults had ever seen from such a small child. "I promised Daddy I would always keep him close to my heart. This jacket makes me feel like he's still hugging me every day. I can't take it off." The teacher's heart broke a little hearing those words, but she still didn't understand the full truth behind Emma's attachment to the worn military jacket. Like everyone else, she assumed it was just a child's stubborn phase that would pass with time. October came to Millbrook with beautiful fall colors and cooler weather. One Thursday morning, something very special was happening at Jefferson Elementary School. The school was hosting its annual Veterans Day ceremony, even though the holiday was still weeks away. They had invited several real military officers to speak to the students about military service, honor, and what it meant to serve your country. Emma wore her father's jacket with special pride that day, hoping that finally someone would understand why it was so important to her. Maybe the visiting soldiers would recognize the patches and realize she wasn't just pretending or trying to get attention. Maybe they would see that her father really had been a hero. The school auditorium was filled with excited students, proud teachers, and many parents who had come to watch the special ceremony. Red, white, and blue decorations hung from the walls, and small American flags were placed on every seat. On the stage sat several men and women in crisp military uniforms covered with colorful ribbons, shiny medals, and various patches that showed their years of service. The principal, Mr. Roberts, stood at the podium to introduce the guests. "Today we're honored to have real American heroes visit our school," he announced proudly. "These brave men and women have served our country around the world, protecting our freedom and keeping us safe." Among the visiting military officers was General Thomas Mitchell, a tall man with gray hair and kind but sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. He had served for over 30 years in various locations around the world and was highly respected throughout the entire military. His uniform displayed numerous honors and decorations from his distinguished career, including several medals that were only given to the most exceptional soldiers. As the ceremony began, all the students filed into neat rows in the auditorium. Emma sat in the third row, her father's jacket clearly visible to anyone who looked her way. Some kids were still whispering and pointing at her, but she tried to ignore them and focus on the speakers. General Mitchell was in the middle of giving an inspiring speech about courage, sacrifice, and love of country when his eyes swept across the audience of children. Suddenly, his gaze stopped completely on Emma. His expression changed from professional friendliness to shock and disbelief. His eyes widened, and his face went pale as he stared at the patches visible on Emma's oversized jacket. The general stopped talking mid-sentence, unable to continue his speech while staring at what he was seeing. The auditorium fell completely silent as students, teachers, and parents turned to see what had captured the important military officer's attention so completely. "Excuse me," the general said, his voice shaking slightly with emotion. He stepped down from the stage and walked directly toward Emma, moving through the rows of seated children. His eyes never left the jacket, focusing intensely on the patches and insignia that were mostly hidden by the jacket's large size. The other students moved aside quickly as the tall general approached, sensing that something very important was happening. Emma looked up at him with wide, confused eyes, not sure if she was in trouble. The general knelt down to her level, his experienced eyes examining the eagle patch, the skull insignia, and the rows of ribbon decorations. "Young lady," he said very gently, his voice filled with respect and awe, "may I ask where you got that jacket?" Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but everyone in the silent auditorium could hear her answer. "It was my daddy's jacket. He was a soldier like you." The general's eyes immediately filled with tears that he tried to blink away. He recognized the patches instantly, and his military training allowed him to read the story they told. The 75th Ranger Regiment patch. The Airborne Wings. The Special Operations Insignia. The Combat Infantry Badge. The Silver Star Ribbon. The Purple Heart. This wasn't just any military jacket. This belonged to an elite soldier who had seen serious combat. "What was your father's name, sweetheart?" the general asked, his voice full of respect and growing emotion. "Staff Sergeant James Collins," Emma said proudly, sitting up straighter as she spoke her father's name and rank. The general closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by recognition and emotion. He knew that name. He had read the reports. He had signed the recommendation letters. He knew exactly who Staff Sergeant James Collins was and what he had done. Standing up slowly, General Mitchell turned to face the entire auditorium full of students, teachers, and parents. His voice was strong and clear, filled with deep emotion and military authority that commanded everyone's complete attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, students and teachers, parents and staff, I need every single person in this room to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. This young lady, Emma Collins, is wearing the jacket of one of the finest, bravest, most heroic soldiers I ever had the honor and privilege to serve alongside during my 30 years in the United States Army." The auditorium was completely silent. Even the youngest children stopped fidgeting and whispering. Everyone could sense that something very important and serious was happening. Staff Sergeant James Collins was a member of the 75th Ranger Regiment, one of our military's most elite special operations units. Only the best soldiers, the smartest, strongest, and most dedicated men and women earned the right to wear that patch. Sergeant Collins completed 3 full tours of duty in Afghanistan, saving countless American and civilian lives through his exceptional courage, skill, and dedication to his fellow soldiers. The general's voice grew stronger and more passionate as he continued, his military bearing commanding respect from every person in the room. On his final mission, Sergeant Collins and his team were tasked with protecting a convoy of medical supplies heading to a remote village where children needed urgent medical care. They were ambushed by enemy fighters who had planned the attack carefully. When his fellow soldiers were pinned down by heavy enemy fire and couldn't move without being shot, Sergeant Collins made the ultimate decision that every soldier hopes they'll be brave enough to make if the moment comes. Everyone in the auditorium was listening intently now, hanging on every word. Parents leaned forward in their seats. Teachers had tears in their eyes. Students who had never heard a real war story sat transfixed. Sergeant Collins left his position of safety and single-handedly charged the enemy positions, drawing their fire away from his trapped teammates and the medical convoy. For over 20 minutes, he held off more than a dozen enemy fighters by himself, allowing his entire team and the convoy to escape safely to deliver those life-saving medical supplies to the village children. The general paused, his voice thick with emotion as he prepared to share the most difficult part of the story. James Collins was struck down while protecting others, but his sacrifice allowed 12 American soldiers and over 30 Afghan civilians to return home safely to their families. He was posthumously awarded the Silver Star, one of our nation's highest honors, for exceptional gallantry in action against an armed enemy. He gave his life so that others could live. Staff Sergeant James Collins was a genuine American hero in every sense of the word. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she sat up straighter than ever before, finally understanding the full meaning of her father's sacrifice and why everyone always told her he was special. The general turned back to Emma, his own eyes bright with unshed tears of respect and admiration. "Emma, your father died saving the lives of 12 soldiers who went home to hug their own children, and countless Afghan civilians including many children just like you. Every single patch on this sacred jacket represents his bravery, his training, his skill and his sacrifice for others. You have been wearing the uniform of a genuine war hero, a man who represents the very best of American military service." Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest that she had never experienced before. Finally, someone understood why the jacket was so important to her. The general addressed the auditorium again, his voice now stern and commanding in a way that made everyone sit up straighter. "For months, I'm told, children in this school have been mocking and teasing this brave little girl for wearing her father's jacket. You have been making fun of a Gold Star family, the family of a fallen hero who died protecting your freedom and the freedom of innocent people around the world." The shame and guilt in the room was almost visible. Teachers looked down at their hands, realizing how wrong they had been. Students who had teased Emma felt their cheeks burn with embarrassment and regret. Parents realized how poorly they had judged the situation. This jacket is not a costume from a store. It is not a thrift store find. It is not inappropriate clothing for a child. It is a sacred memorial to a man who paid the ultimate price for his country and for all of you sitting in this room today. Every thread, every patch, every fade mark, every small repair tells the story of a hero's service and a family's sacrifice. Tyler, the boy who had bullied Emma most cruelly, began to cry openly, finally understanding how terrible his behavior had been. Madison covered her face with her hands, ashamed of every mean comment she had made. Other children throughout the auditorium were crying as they realized they had been mocking a hero's daughter. The general knelt down to Emma again and spoke softly, but his voice carried throughout the completely silent auditorium. "Emma, your father would be so incredibly proud of you for honoring his memory by wearing his jacket every day. You have shown more courage and character than many adults I know by facing months of teasing and still choosing to honor your father's sacrifice every single day." He gently touched one of the patches on her sleeve with the reverence usually reserved for touching a flag or a gravestone. "This eagle patch means your father was airborne qualified. He jumped out of airplanes to serve his country. This ranger tab means he completed some of the hardest military training in the world. This combat infantry badge means he faced the enemy in battle. This Silver Star ribbon represents the medal he earned for being a hero when it mattered most." Emma listened to every word with rapt attention, finally understanding the full story that each patch and ribbon told about her father's service. "Never ever let anyone make you feel ashamed of this jacket again, young lady. You wear it with honor because it represents honor, courage, sacrifice and love. These are the most important qualities any person can have." The general stood and faced the audience one final time, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades of military leadership. "I want every single person in this room to remember this moment for the rest of your lives. Before you judge someone, before you mock someone, before you assume you know their story, remember Emma Collins and her father's jacket. Remember that what looks ordinary or strange to you might be the most extraordinary and meaningful thing in someone else's world." He paused, letting his words sink deep into every heart and mind in the room. Staff Sergeant Collins died so that every person in this room could sit here safely today, in a free country with the right to learn and grow and live in peace without fear. The least we can do, the very least, is treat his daughter and his memory with the respect and honor that their sacrifice has earned. General Mitchell then did something that stunned everyone in the auditorium. He came to attention and gave Emma a formal military salute, the same salute that soldiers give to honor fallen heroes and their families. It was a gesture of the deepest military respect, acknowledging both Emma's courage and her father's ultimate sacrifice. The entire auditorium immediately rose to their feet in respectful silence, many people wiping tears from their eyes. The moment felt sacred, like being in a church or at a memorial service. From that life-changing day forward, everything was completely different for Emma at Jefferson Elementary School. The transformation was immediate and total. Tyler approached Emma after the ceremony with tears streaming down his face, his voice shaking with genuine remorse. "Emma, I'm so sorry for everything I said. I didn't know about your dad. Can you ever forgive me? Can I sit with you at lunch?" Madison brought a bouquet of flowers to school the next day, flowers she had picked from her mother's garden. She gave them to Emma with a heartfelt apology. "Emma, I feel terrible about all the mean things I said. Your dad was a real hero and you're brave too. I want to be your friend if you'll let me." Mrs. Henderson pulled Emma aside after the ceremony, her eyes red from crying. "Emma, I owe you the deepest apology any teacher has ever owed a student. I should have asked more questions. I should have tried to understand instead of judging. Your father's jacket is not only welcome in my classroom, it's an honor to have it here. You can wear it every single day for the rest of the year." Mr. Roberts, the principal, was equally apologetic and ashamed of his earlier phone call to Emma's mother. "Emma, I made a terrible mistake. We're going to make sure every teacher and every student in this school learns about military families and the sacrifices they make for all of us. Your father's story will help us all become better, more understanding people." The change in the other students was remarkable. Instead of avoiding Emma, children began approaching her with respect and genuine curiosity. They asked thoughtful questions about her father's service, about what the different patches meant, about what it was like to be part of a military family. Emma found herself surrounded by new friends who wanted to learn from her rather than tease her. "Emma, can you tell us more about what your dad did in the army?" asked Sarah, a quiet girl who had never spoken to Emma before. "Was he really as brave as the general said?" Emma glowed with pride as she shared stories her mother had told her, finally able to talk openly about her father's heroism. Parents throughout the community reached out to Emma's mother, offering friendship, support, and apologies for their previous judgments. The local Veterans of Foreign Wars Post invited Emma to be their guest of honor at their monthly dinner. The town newspaper wrote a feature story about Staff Sergeant James Collins's service and Emma's courage in honoring his memory despite facing months of ridicule. Mrs. Patterson, who lived next door to Emma and her mother, brought over a home-cooked meal and an apology. "Sarah, I'm ashamed that I never asked about James's service. I just assumed Emma was going through a phase. Can you tell me about him? I'd like to know about the hero who lived next door." Most importantly, Emma walked taller and smiled brighter than she had in months. She finally understood that her father's jacket wasn't just old clothing. It was a symbol of the highest human values: courage, sacrifice, honor, selflessness, and love of country and fellow human beings. She wore it with pride, knowing that she carried her father's legacy with her everywhere she went. General Mitchell kept his word and stayed in touch with Emma's family. He became like an honorary grandfather to Emma, visiting whenever his duties allowed. He told her detailed stories about her father's training, his leadership abilities, and the respect he had earned from his fellow soldiers. He helped Emma understand the military traditions and values she was part of as the daughter of a fallen hero. "Your father was the kind of soldier that other soldiers looked up to," General Mitchell told Emma during one of his visits. "He was brave, but he was also kind. He was strong, but he also cared deeply about protecting innocent people. Those are the qualities that made him a true hero." Years passed, and Emma grew from a small, sad 8-year-old into a confident, proud young woman. When she graduated from high school at 18, she still had her father's jacket hanging in her closet. She wore it to the graduation ceremony, and everyone in the packed auditorium, classmates, teachers, parents, and community members, stood and applauded when they saw her walking across the stage. She had grown into the jacket perfectly, not just in physical size but in spirit and character. Emma decided to follow in her father's footsteps and join the military after high school. She became an officer in the same army her father had served, completing rigorous training and serving with the same courage, dedication, and commitment to others that Staff Sergeant James Collins had shown. She kept his jacket in her footlocker throughout her military career, a daily reminder of the hero who had inspired her life of service. During her own deployments, Emma would write letters to the students at Jefferson Elementary School, sharing her experiences and encouraging them to always look deeper before judging others. "Remember," she would write, "that everyone has a story, and sometimes the most important stories are hidden beneath what we can see on the surface." The story of Emma Collins and her father's military jacket became a permanent part of Jefferson Elementary School's history and traditions. Every year on Veterans Day, teachers would tell new students about the little girl who honored her father's memory and the general who taught an entire community about respect, sacrifice, and the true meaning of heroism. The school created a special display case in the main hallway with a photograph of Staff Sergeant James Collins in his dress uniform, a copy of his Silver Star citation, and a written account of Emma's story. Students would stop and read it regularly, learning that courage comes in many forms and that heroes' families deserve our respect and support. And every year, students learned invaluable lessons that would stay with them for life, that sometimes the most ordinary-looking things carry the most extraordinary stories, that we should always look deeper and ask questions with kindness rather than judgment, that we should never mock someone based on appearances alone, and that freedom isn't free, it's protected by brave men and women who sacrifice everything for others. Emma's courage in wearing her father's jacket every day, despite months of cruel teasing and adult pressure to conform, had taught an entire community about true honor. Her father's sacrifice had protected his fellow soldiers and innocent civilians in a far-off land, but Emma's quiet bravery had protected something equally important: the memory, respect, and honor that every fallen hero deserves. The faded military jacket that had once brought Emma pain, isolation, and ridicule became a symbol of pride, respect, community understanding, and the unbreakable bond between a daughter and her hero father. It reminded everyone who saw it that freedom comes at a price, that heroes walk among us in all forms, and that sometimes the smallest person can teach the biggest lessons about honor, courage, and what it truly means to love your country. In the end, Emma Collins proved that you don't have to be a soldier to be a hero. Sometimes all you need is the courage to honor those who came before you, the strength to stand up to those who don't understand, the wisdom to know that some things are worth defending no matter the cost, and the character to do what's right even when it's difficult. The jacket still hangs in Emma's home today, a treasured reminder of her father's love and sacrifice, and of the day when a general's recognition changed everything for a little girl and her entire community. It serves as permanent proof that every hero's story deserves to be told, every sacrifice deserves to be honored, every military family deserves our respect and support, and every child deserves to be proud of the legacy they carry in their hearts.